We are very glad to have Krishna-katha Prabhu with us. He is a disciple of Vaisheshika Prabhu, and he recently got initiated on the wonderful day of Gaura Purnima. And he will be speaking to us about text 35 of chapter 4 of the Bhagavad-gītā As It Is, and I hand over to you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you all the devotees for joining. So today we'll be discussing the verse 435 from chapter 4, the transcendental knowledge. So as a tradition, we'll start with the Jai Radha Madhava prayers, and then we'll switch. We'll go with the pranam prayers, and finally we'll discuss the verse. So sing the Jai Radha Madhava prayers. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan Ji ki jai, Shri Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki jai, Shri Lakshmi Narasimhadev Bhagwan ki jai, Shri Shri Bhakta Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad-gītā ki jai. So so we'll start with the verse, dear devotees. So today we are discussing the verse 35th verse from the Transcendental Knowledge, from chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge. And I'll just read the verse in Sanskrit first, and then we'll read the translation purport, followed by the discussion on the verse. Prabhu, should I have to share my screen so that everyone can also read the verse?
Yes, I can do that. I think, do you need permission to do that? Do I need to grant you any special rights?
I'm just checking out. Okay, I don't see any option here.
I think I need to make you co-host.
Yep.
And then you should be able to share the screen.
Or maybe you can also just share the link so that maybe you can share. That takes time. Okay, for some reason. Okay, yeah, but first. Yeah, or maybe you can also share. That's also fine.
Okay, yeah, just give me a second. I'll be setting up.
Sorry.
Yeah, so here it is.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll read the verse first. Jñātvā punar moham evaṁ yāsyasi pāṇḍava yena bhūtāny aśeṣāṇi drakṣyasy ātmany atho mayi. So we'll read the translation. Having obtained the real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. We'll also read the purport. The result of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul, or one who knows things as they are, is learning that all living beings are part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. The sense of an existence separate from Krishna is called maya. Maya, ma, not, ya, this. Something that we have nothing to do with Krishna, that Krishna is only a historical personality and that the Absolute is the impersonal Brahman. Factually, as it is stated in the Bhagavad-gītā, this impersonal Brahman is the personal effulgence of Krishna. Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of everything. In the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Even the millions of incarnations are only his different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. This thought is material in nature. We have experience in the material world that a thing, when fragmentally distributed, loses its original identity. But the Mayavadi philosophers fail to understand that absolute means that 1 + 1 is equal to 1 and 1 - 1 is equal to 1. This is the case in the absolute world. For want of such knowledge in the absolute science, we are now covered with illusion. And therefore, we think that we are separate from Krishna. Although we are separated parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless not different from him. The bodily difference of the living entities is Maya, or not actual fact. We are all meant to satisfy Krishna. By Maya alone, Arjuna thought that the temporary bodily relationship with his kinsman was more important than his eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. The whole teaching of the Gita is targeted towards this end, that a living being, as Krishna's eternal servitor, cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being an identity apart from Krishna is called Maya. The living entities, as separate parts and parcels of the Supreme, have a purpose to fulfill. Having forgotten that purpose, since time immemorial, they are situated in different bodies, as men, animals, demigods, etc. Such bodily difference arises from forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. But when one is engaged in the transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, one becomes at once liberated from this illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the supreme soul, Krishna, is the supreme shelter of all living entities, and giving up such shelter. And giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves to have a separate entity. Thus, under different standards of material identity, they become forgetful of Krishna. When, however, such deluded living entities become situated in Krishna consciousness, it is to be understood that they are on the path of liberation, as confirmed in the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, Muktir hitvanyatha rupam swarupena vyavastitihi. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as the eternal servitor of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. So we just say the pranam prayers. Om Ajnanathmirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yudhapadakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamsha Sri Rupam Sagrachatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha Namo Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarina He Krishna Karuna Sindhuti Pāṇḍu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Vanchakalpa Katarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So in this verse, basically the Krishna is instructing us on what is our real constitutional position. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, in a more systematic manner, explains this verse when Krishna says, okay, what is our constitutional position? And Krishna says, like here, by obtaining this real knowledge, and one can avoid falling into the illusion and thereby attain the realize one's constitutional position as the part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. And if we read at the purport, Srila Prabhupada very systematically breaks down this whole purport, and if we kind of structure this purport, so what is our constitutional position is the first thing, right? And in this verse, as we discussed, as Krishna is instructing us through this verse that we are the part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is our actual constitutional position. And Srila Prabhupada further explains in a structured manner like how to realize our constitutional position, or in other words, how to obtain this real knowledge. So what Krishna says in the verse, like what is real knowledge? And thereby further explaining what is real knowledge and what are the hindrances. So what stops us to obtain this real knowledge, which is basically Maya, the illusion. And finally, Srila Prabhupada explains what are the results of obtaining this real knowledge. So yeah, so these are the 5 parts we can understand from this verse, like what is our constitutional position and how to realize this constitutional position. That is basically to realize the to obtain the real knowledge, one can realize one's constitutional position. And so what is real knowledge, and what are the hindrances to obtain this real knowledge, and finally what are the results of obtaining this real knowledge. So coming back to this verse, the basic crux of this verse was Krishna's instructing us, explaining us what is our constitutional position. And our constitutional position is basically we are the part and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. And then comes the question, how to realize this, or how to realize that we are the parts and parcels of Krishna. And this is where Lord Krishna says that you have to obtain this real knowledge. And the next question comes up is, what is real knowledge? Yeah, and so the real knowledge, Srila Prabhupada explains in 5 to 6 points. So basically, the Bhagavad-gītā, in most of the Srila Prabhupada purports in Bhagavad-gītā and Bhagavatam, explains several aspects of the real knowledge. But as we are in the context of this verse, and each of the Srila Prabhupada is filled with lot of real knowledge. And in this verse, Srila Prabhupada explains basically the 5 different points that the real knowledge is to know that, we are part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and the Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. And as we hear from Brahma Samhita, Sarva Karana Karanam, in the first verse of Brahma Samhita. So he is the cause of all causes. And that's the second thing which Srila Prabhupada explains, that he is our supreme shelter. Yeah. And that millions of incarnations of Lord Sri Krishna are just as different expansions. And we are all meant, as a spiritual soul, we are all meant to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is our real purpose. And finally, once we realize the real purpose of us, that, we have to realize our constitutional position. And once we realize this, we try to understand that, we are just taking different bodies, like sometimes as living beings, as a human, animals, sometimes as a demigods, and so on. We keep on rotating within these different types of bodies. And once we realize this purpose, once we obtain this real knowledge, and then we can actually get rid of this janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha dosha. So we'll finally get out of this, the birth, old age, disease, and death. So these were the few points which Srila Prabhupada explains about when explaining about what is the real knowledge. And then, so since we know that what is the real knowledge, and now also the question comes up, how to obtain this real knowledge. Yeah, and how to obtain real knowledge, we discussed this in last week. It was explained by jñātvā Prabhu, that the 3 steps were simple, that one has to submit to a spiritual master, and one has to serve his spiritual master, and finally inquire. So this is the submit, serve, and inquire from the spiritual master. And this is how one can obtain this real knowledge. Yeah, but here comes the challenge. So we know what is real knowledge and how to obtain this real knowledge, but not everyone is doing, is because there is some hindrance, or there is something which stops us to obtain this real knowledge. And that is basically, which Krishna says in this verse, the illusion. Illusion is something is called maya. This is what it stops us. We know one has to first learn what is real knowledge, and one has learned how to obtain this real knowledge, to submit, serve, and inquire from the spiritual master. And between, there's something called maya, and this is where the whole world is stuck at now. Everyone is entangled in this material world, and it's just illusion, right? We cannot see how things as they are. and that's the basic illusion. And Srila Prabhupada explains in simple terms this the Maya in the same verse again. The several points which are raised which are explained by Srila Prabhupada about this illusion is that the first thing is we think that we are separate from Krishna because yeah, obviously we are covered with illusion, and we think that we are separate from Krishna. And many say that, okay, Krishna is a superior person, okay, but I do not agree with him as a supreme personality of Godhead. And I have my own existence. So this is one of the illusion we have. Like, we think that we are separate from Krishna, but the fact is we are not different from him. As in the purport, as we read, right, that millions of incarnations are only his different expansions. Millions of incarnations are only his different expansions. So we are not separate from Krishna, but we are part and parcel of him. So this is one illusion, that we think we are separate from Krishna. And okay, this is something everyone fights with. I mean, this is very common, or most of them have a general understanding about this illusion, is that the temporary bodily relationship with our kinsmen, the relatives, friends, family members, is more important than our eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. And if I mean, the Maya everyone has his own experience, because Maya is kind of very subtle, and everyone has his own experience of Maya. Is like, here we are discussing few points which are in the context of this with this purport. So this is one thing, that the temporary body relationship with our kinsmen and with the family members or the friends, and say, we don't know how we get into this relationship, and we kind of be so much engaged in this relationship, and we think that, okay, this is eternal and so on, but which is again illusion, right? And because everyone has to pass away from this world, and especially in this Kali Yuga, the age of quarrel, I mean, the conflicts are very common. Like, even when someone says a word, or when someone just breaks a promise or so on, and then like all the while they just show to the world like how each person loves the other person and so on. But within a moment, it's completely like, who is he? It's just broken. And this is one strong attachment, which is basically the illusion, the attachment between as Srila Prabhupada explains, between the husband and wife, mother and children, or the father, many other relationships, the friends, and so on. And we think this is eternal relationship, and we forgot our real eternal relationship with Krishna. And this Srila Prabhupada gives another example here. This is the basic hindrance. This was the basic, very fundamental reason for the Arjuna's argument to not fight in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And the whole Bhagavad-gītā was spoken to just clear the doubts of Arjuna, that, okay, why are you thinking that why do you think that these are the eternal relationship? Because yeah, I mean, we see, I mean, my Guru Maharaj explains this as, in India, if you like, if you're traveling, and if you're traveling on the highway and so on, you sit there in the dhaba or the roadside restaurants and so on, and people from different places come there, and they gather there, they sit together, and they feel like, okay, we are friends, and they make relationship, they laugh, they share something, and so on. But once they finish their meal, and everyone is on his way, like, okay, goodbye, and so on. So one can understand this in this context. So so just to give an example, and this was the biggest concern for Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, to perform his duties. And it's not wrong to have this kind of relationship with one's wife, with one's children, or with one's husband or friends and so on. But the essence is that we can also use this. I mean, develop this relationship around serving Krishna, keep Krishna as the center of your life, and then serve Krishna. So that is the so that's what points out to this point, that it's important that we have to maintain this eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. So whatever you do, whatever relationship you have, whatever work you do, and so on, it has to be connected with Krishna. It shouldn't be independent of Krishna. So you all set up around yourself, and Krishna is like, okay, we'll just maybe in India, it's like, okay, Krishna is God, we'll visit once a week in the temple. But as we discussed, like, I mean, if we kind of keep Krishna independent, so it's like the same, like we are coming to a dhaba, you're sitting, you're enjoying for a while, having the meal, and then you're just gone. Okay, bye-bye, and so on. But if you keep Krishna in the center and we develop our relationships and so on to serve him as the center, that makes a relationship more meaningful, and that serves the purpose of life. So this is one thing. And so when we are discussing about the illusion, the first we discussed about, we think that we are separate from Krishna. The second is that we developed all the temporary bodily relationships, and we think that these relationships are more important than our eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. And the other thing, the third point which Srila Prabhupada explains in this verse is that to think that the living entity is equal to Krishna, which is another snare of Maya. So we discussed, so these were the few points which Srila Prabhupada explains about what are the typical characteristics of Maya, which kinds of stops us to, or is a kind of hindrance to obtain this real knowledge. And then finally, this verse, to summarize this verse, and Srila Prabhupada explains what are the results of obtaining the real knowledge. Right? So we discussed about what is the real knowledge, is to realize our constitutional position, and we discussed what are the what is the way to obtain this real knowledge, is to submit to a spiritual master, is to serve the spiritual master, and then inquire with the spiritual master. And so we know these things, but there's something called Maya, which kind of keeps away from obtaining this real knowledge, which keeps away from to have this tendency to submit to a spiritual master, to serve the spiritual master, or to inquire from the spiritual master. And these are the typical characteristics of Maya, which keeps us. And so once we figure out these things, and then Srila Prabhupada explains, like, and one may ask, like, okay, I know the real knowledge, and I also know the procedure or the ways to obtain the spiritual knowledge, and I also know what is Maya, and I also know how to. I can also try to devise a plan to avoid Maya and so on. But again, finally the question comes: what is the result then? Like, what is in it for me? Like, what is the real result of obtaining this real knowledge and so on? And then Srila Prabhupada explains here that the result is that one realizes the real purpose of the life. It's that the real purpose of the life is to fully engage oneself in the transcendental service of Lord Krishna. So we discussed about, we discussed one of the points when we were discussing about one of the aspects of Maya, that we consider these temporary bodily relationships more important than our eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. And we also discussed, like, I mean, we have to mold our relationships in such a way that we shouldn't keep Krishna independent, but we should keep Krishna in the center. And then we have to develop our relationship around that, make it more centric towards that. And so that we would realize that the result of obtaining real knowledge is that we have realized the real purpose, right? The real purpose is to fully engage in the transcendental service of Krishna. And then the other point, realizing the results of obtaining real knowledge, is that again, coming back to our basic point of this was that we are part and parcel of Krishna. We are not independent living entities. So this is one takeaway as well. One can say that in this material world, we are not kind of lost, right? So when something happens in life, when someone loses their loved ones and so on, and they think like, okay, what's next for me in this life? Like, I don't have any purpose to live for because I love them so much, and now they are no more in this world. And one day, but like when with this verse, when one understands this verse in the right context, so one can gets this assurance from Krishna that he's always looking for us. Like, we just have to turn to him, and then you have this real purpose. You have found the real purpose. And then you also know, like, okay, there is always someone. Like, these bodily temporary relationships, they are coming and going, and every time I'm getting disappointed, I might kind of be separated from our loved ones. Either they pass away from this world, or there's some conflict or whatever. And there's a disappointment at every step. Like, dukhalayam ashashvatam, the nature of this material world is dukhalayam ashashvatam. But when one continuously tries to meditate upon this verse, when one tries to understand this verse, this Krishna's promise that you are part and we are part and parcel of him, like, and then one gets the assurance, like, okay, I'm going through a lot of things in my life. Like, someone goes through health problems. So the three types of the typical problems one faces in this material world is the adhyatmika, adibhautik, adidaivik. One's own body troubles one, and the other living entities trouble one, and the nature has different ways to, sometimes it's extreme cold, sometimes it's extreme heat, and so on. And so this is there, but when one realizes this ultimate purpose, that, okay, my real purpose is to completely engage myself in the transcendental service of Krishna, and then I'm not lost here. I have a particular identity here. And all these temporary things, though I'm going through, there is someone who is looking up, who is always waiting for me to turn back to him. And this Maya is keeping away from him. And when I obtain this real knowledge, then I have a purpose to live, like, and I have a very good purpose to live. And people, there are many Mayavadis, and there are many pseudo-secular spiritual masters. Everyone comes up with a philosophy of, okay, you can do this, you can do that. There's a lot of motivational speakers and going on. But like, it's just another flavor of enjoying, another variant, or maybe one can say a more polished version of enjoying this material world. Yeah. So it's basically you're getting cheated at every step. But if we take the shelter of the Bhagavad-gītā, the message of Bhagavad-gītā, and if we practice the Krishna consciousness, if we submit to a spiritual master, if we inquire about this real knowledge and so on, it systematically it purifies. You will be coming out of this illusion and so on. And yeah, so then you realize that, okay, we have a real purpose. And the second result of obtaining this is this, that, okay, we are part and parcel of Supreme. I'm not lost here. I have someone who's always waiting for me. Though I'm kind of frustrated, at some day I have someone I can turn back to him. So this is assured. This is the assurance given by Krishna in this verse. And finally, we are on the path of liberation. And so the three results were we have the real purpose to fulfill. That is, we have to fully engage in the service of Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then that, okay, we are part and parcel of Krishna. I have someone always to look after me. And whenever I'm kind of tired of all this material world, then I still have someone who is my supreme shelter. And finally, we are on the path of liberation. And when it comes to liberation, like, there are many meanings of liberation in other religions or other sects and so on. And there I mean, the whole liberation, the word of liberation, at least in India, like there are many groups and everyone has a different understanding of liberation. And but I mean, so mostly people focus on this four purusharthas, right? Like dharma, artha, kama, and finally, okay, I'm done with kama, and it's moksha, liberation. And so at least I found that the perfect meaning of liberation was, actually, I found that only in the words of Srila Prabhupada. I mean, Srila Prabhupada perfectly explained on, actually, it made sense, like, okay, this is the actual liberation. And what is liberation? Srila Prabhupada quotes from the Bhagavatam 2.10.6 that muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavasthitihi. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna. So liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna consciousness. So, I mean, this, I found it really perfect explanation, because, I mean, so far until I read Srila Prabhupada purports, or my understanding of liberation is mostly, okay, I sit in some kind of cave or on a lonely place and I kind of meditate on something which is void, completely void, and that's not practical at all. You know, as in one of the lectures, His Holiness Shishyananda Swami Maharaj in the temple itself explained, while singing the kirtans and so on, if you don't believe in God, then you can. So all of the devotees sitting in the temple can meditate on Jagannath, and those who think they're atheists or God, or if they don't believe in God, they can meditate on banana, something. So, I mean, as I said, like, until I came across the Srila Prabhupada's purport or explanation from the Srimad Bhagavatam, what is actually liberation? I mean, so far, the basic understanding was liberation is maybe I have to sit in some lonely place or in the Himalayas, and then I have to just meditate on something, maybe banana or whatever it is. And yeah, but it is not practical. And that's where one can prove to the, when I go for book distribution or wherever, this is the one thing one can say, like, okay, liberation is something, what's nirvana and so on, like sitting on, meditating on something void and so on, and then you just leave this body and so on. But that is not possible, because I mean, you might go sit for a while, and then one might get bored and come back, because our nature is, the soul is ever active. So that's not possible. And when you see this thing, when we understand this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, liberation, the explanation of Srila Prabhupada, that liberation, translation by Srila Prabhupada, that liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna. So that's actually the liberation. So, and it is, so when one actually sits and ponders upon this explanation of liberation, it makes perfect sense, because I mean, we are always active. I mean, you can maybe even someone is an introvert, or whose nature is, who's not much interested or speak a lot and so on. He can lock himself in his room, but he needs at least a book or maybe an internet or whatever, but he cannot sit idle. And how can we expect that we sit somewhere and kind of get liberated, just meditating on something void completely? And this is where when liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna, it makes perfect sense, because every activity you do from morning to evening, you can align that activity as a service to Krishna. And yeah, we basically have a limited time span on this in this material world. Why not engage our time, our energy, and everything, the resources we have, get this kind of liberation, to practice this kind of liberation, instead of just going blind with the flow of like, okay, you have to meditate on something void, you have to control your breath. Okay, of course, these things were also explained in the Dhyana Yoga chapter, but Srila Prabhupada explains that this is not practical. And this is the most practical, the path for the liberation is to engage oneself in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna. So whatever we do from morning to evening and so on, just try to do it as a service to the Krishna, and that makes your life perfect, because we all have a limited time here, and why not make the best use of it? Just make the best use of it. Someone lives for 60 years, someone 70, someone 80, someone 90. But even one lives beyond 100, there's no point if we do not get this real knowledge, if we don't realize our constitutional position, and we keep on serving our own senses, our bodily relationships, and so on, it doesn't make sense, even if you live for over 100 years and so on. So sometimes I keep meditating on this kind of liberation, that, okay, I just have a limited time. It's kind of an offer period. People like, there's a lot of sale going on and so on, the limited period. Okay, I have this time span of 75 years. I'll make the best use of it, because I've got nothing to lose. And everything you lose in this material world. Like, I get a good position, I lose it afterwards, I anchor for the next level on my career or profession. I earn something and I earn for next level, and so on. And in all doing all this, and I'm not considering that with every sunset and sunrise, my time is getting expired on this material world. So why not practice this kind of liberation, like engage all your energy, resources, your intelligence, and so on, as to obtain this real knowledge, and to be an eternal servitor of Krishna and Krishna consciousness. So yeah, this was the third result which we discussed, and finally, Srila Prabhupada says the same thing, the result of obtaining this real knowledge. So this was said in the lecture in New York about when Srila Prabhupada was discussing about the same verse, that so I can just read the verse that the lecture transcriptions of the same verse 4.35, that Srila Prabhupada says that people are anxious to see God. Here Lord Sri Krishna says that as soon as one gets knowledge from the right person, then he never comes into the field of delusion. The whole thing is that in the present stage of our life, we are conditioned and deluded. So this is what we discussed about the illusion. And Srila Prabhupada continues, we do not know things as they are. So that is one thing basically. So everything is illusion. And that is the cause of all our miseries. And we discussed the several types of miseries. So, and otherwise, constitutionally, we are ānandamayo bhyasyat. By nature, we are jolly. So by nature, we are jolly. And since we are deluded, and the whole thing is that in the present age of our life, we are conditioned and deluded, and we do not know the things as they are. That is the cause of all our miseries. But otherwise, constitutionally, we are supposed to be jolly all the time. That is ānandamayo bhyasyat. So yeah, the result, the last result. So as part of the several points we discussed of what is the result of obtaining knowledge, this was the last point which I found, that one will be jolly all the time, ānandamayo bhyasat, and that is our constitutional position. Right? We are supposed to be eternally joyful. And since we got engaged in this material world, and we try to serve our own senses, and which will never be satisfied, you can never satisfy, So we are kind of struggling from morning to evening, like day after day, like tomorrow is better. But when you don't know what is actually better, you keep on striving for what is better, and you keep on struggling, and you will never realize that day, that actual day. And here, here Srila Prabhupada concludes that basically when you get this real knowledge, we will realize that we will be jolly ever, like Anandamaya Vyasa. So that is our real constitution, to be joyful ever, like for every moment and so on. Yeah, and I mean one can say like, okay, it's simple, like to say like we are jolly and I practice Krishna consciousness and I'll be jolly and so on. Yes, we have a lot of challenges. I mean, those even who practice Krishna conscious, one can say like, no, he practices Krishna consciousness. Why he has problems in his life and so on. But as we learned from several, where Srila Prabhupada in several purports explains that, Krishna has a special plan for each and every devotee. Like Krishna has devised a special plan for each and every devotee. And since we are engaged in this material world since time immemorial, and it takes a little time, and this is a purification process. Like when one faces some problem in life and so on, it's kind of purificatory process. But if we approach the transcendental knowledge with that mindset, and we develop this attitude, we develop the Krishna consciousness, or day after day, and at some point you will see the results. I mean, everyone has its own experience of practicing Krishna consciousness, how things are revealed over the time. So yeah, so that's how the results, to summarize, like what's are the results of obtaining this real knowledge. And yeah, just to summarize this, the discussion, I found is the 3 takeaways from this verse. The 4.35 verse is the first takeaway is, okay, Krishna is instructing on me to how to avoid illusion, is to get the real knowledge, so that I can realize my constitutional position as part and parcel of Supreme. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that Krishna is assuring, like, every time we go through something in life and so on, like we get disappointed, okay, why it happened this way, it should have happened that way, and so on and so on. And our closed ones, we lose someone of our closed ones and so on. But here, if you see that Krishna says, they are mine. If we just go back to the verse, here the Krishna says that all living entities are part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. So, okay, I have someone. I mean, this is the assurance we have. In this material world, like many say, like at your work, someone might say, your manager might say, no, you are my key resource. Even if I kind of, dissolve this company, I'll keep you, or maybe I can give you the shares and so on. Your manager tries to convince you this way, your parents try to convince that way. Most parents have the genuine love, but at this end, if you see the practical scenario, like even my parents has to pass away from this material world, and I'll be disappointed on that day as well. And my manager is kind of promising, but as long as he gets profit, I'm dear to him, and he might also kind of give just let me go at some point of time, because even he's bound to the 3 modes of material nature. And so this is the assurance where Krishna is giving, like everyone might disappoint you in this world, can disappoint you in this world, but you have someone to take as your supreme shelter. So that's the assurance. This is another takeaway one can say, take from this verse. And finally, this is at least interesting for me. Here, this verse again proves, or Krishna again emphasizes who is supreme. So this is one thing which I liked about this one, that he says, Krishna says, by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme. So he's again declaring that who is Supreme. I mean, there are a lot of discussions, or maybe we also were going on some book distribution and so on. Someone asked, like, okay, why you always say Krishna, Krishna, Krishna? Why is Krishna supreme? And someone from other religious sects, they say, who is the supreme? And even in at least in Hinduism, like there's a lot of argument, like, okay, Lord Shiva is supreme, Lord Brahma is supreme, and so on and so on. Why only Krishna? Why only Krishna? And okay, I mean, it's simple to explain. Yeah, because Krishna says himself. Like, why confusion? Like Krishna, he himself says, but if you can show, you can also show me other things where the other demigods or someone says that he's the supreme. And in most of the Srila Prabhupada lectures, we hear quite often this thing that he might be God. Okay, God might look like this, he may be the God, and so on. And Srila Prabhupada says, like, okay, you all rascals, like, why don't you accept that Krishna is making a propaganda here in the Bhagavad-gita that he is the supreme? Why not just accept it? So here, at least for me, it makes perfect sense. Like, in order to avoid this confusion, like who is supreme and not supreme, this is one of the verse to kind of, put your argument, like why Krishna is supreme, because Krishna himself is declaring. This is one of the verse, and in 7th chapter we have 2 more verses which also kind of stresses on. In 7th and 10th chapter there are additional verses where Krishna says why he is supreme, so it's very clear to understand. So yeah, so these were the few things which I wanted to discuss. And dear devotees, thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to serve you. Yeah, I may have spoken something out of context and so on. That is purely part of my ignorance. And if you find something, whatever useful, it's definitely because of my Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. Please excuse for all the things which you may find out of the context and so on. Thanks a lot. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for speaking those nice and wise words. I like them. Concerning you mentioned liberation. Before we open up for questions, I would like to give my own little comment or my little anecdote. Liberation is something. There are so many concepts of liberation, and it's similar to enlightenment. And I was once asked by someone, do you believe in enlightenment? And I was struggling to find an answer, because we don't find the word enlightenment or the concept of enlightenment in any of our books. So I asked a brahmachari in the temple, do we actually believe in enlightenment? And then he said, well, enlightenment, that's when you understand or realize that you're not this body. And I was thinking, yeah, that's actually true. And so many people, they struggle to find, or they try to find some sort of enlightenment. And we have it. It's like the first thing one of the first things that we hear in the temple or read in the books is, like, you are not this body. It's I once heard a story from someone in America who also had a similar encounter, who was asked, what do you believe in? What's your philosophy? And he said, well, first of all, we're not this body. And oh, wait, that's so profound. That's so deep. And actually, it's so true. We have heard it so often, and we don't really appreciate how profound it is and how much it means. So it is truly, the basics of our philosophy. But that is something that is so so meaningful and so profound. We sometimes lack the appreciation for it because we've heard it so much, so often. And also it's just another way of saying aham brahmasmi. We are spiritual. So what is spiritual? Prabhupada expressed it in the inverse manner. We are not this body, because that's what it actually means. So yeah, we have heard this sentence, this phrase so often, but when we understand how valuable this understanding is, then we can maybe appreciate it even more.
Yeah, I mean, just to add one point to this, Prabhu, I mean, the beauty of the Srila Prabhupada, or maybe the way the Srila Prabhupada clearly explains the purports and so on. When we add one more point to this liberation, Srila Prabhupada says that liberation is just a byproduct. I mean, you need, in most of the cultures or most of the traditions, like they say liberation is the end, but actually liberation is just a byproduct. You will get it for free. Like when you engage in your transcendental service of Lord Sri Krishna, first of all, you feel the eternal bliss, and liberation is just a byproduct of it. And then it's like, okay, when I'm just trying to buy a product, but that product is just a free, so it's something I have more expensive thing to get actually. So yeah, this is another thing, like which I mean, you know, okay, we to realize that we are on the right path. Basically, we are on the right path. Yeah.
So if anyone has a question, you can type it into the chat box, or you could also just unmute yourselves by clicking the microphone icon in the corner of your screen, and then you can speak and say something.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I would like to ask a question by your permission. Hare Krishna, Krishna-katha Prabhu. I am so happy that you got your initiation, and lots of congratulations, and my heartfelt congratulations to you.
Nice to see you, Prabhu.
And I will ask your blessing, so that please bless me that I can also follow your footsteps. And yeah, even if not possible for me in this lifetime, in any of the lifetime, I can have like initiation or Gurudev like you. So please bless me. So Prabhu, my question, yeah, my damn mind forced me to ask this question. So yeah, you mentioned a lot about our constitutional position. Even if we know the knowledge, or we know it by our mind, but not in our heart. I am talking about myself. So when life kicks us, the things like anger and frustrations comes up, right? So yeah, the experience is not good. So when I am frustrated, the faith is moved up or shaken, and the quality of chanting, or that compassion mood or eagerness to do some service is just degrading day by day. So the thing is, I would like to ask you to give me some kind of practical suggestions when we are in this kind of situations, how we can keep our faith on Lord, and yeah, and on the same way we can keep praying and yeah, going forward to liberation. Thank you, bro. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks, Prabhu. Thanks for asking, and it's nice to see you after a long time. I think it's been more than 1.5 years. I mean, so I can simply share what my Guru Maharaj says regarding these things. For two things. First thing is, keep on practicing day in and day out. So this is one thing to keep you on the track. So you have to be constantly in touch with your chanting. You have to be constantly in touch with systematically reading books of Srila Prabhupada, or maybe make it a habit that you read at least in the worst situation for 5 minutes. So you have to practice day in and day out. So that's one thing. So even if you fall down, you have to just get back and do the same thing. So this is how my Guru Maharaj summarizes, like, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So that's the main thing, right? So we have to follow the basics. So everyone goes through these things, but we are lucky that we are on the right path. So that's the assurance we have, and just stick to our basics. Is keep chanting and reading the Srila Prabhupada book. These are the basic two things. Yeah, so this is one thing I can share, is what I said, like the main thing is to keep the main thing. And if we keep doing this day in and day out, I mean, it's not over the night, or maybe for some it takes like years. I mean, so the anger, frustration, how to deal with particular situations, it's quite common because we have to engage with the materialist for like more than 8 or 9 hours per day. So the most of our energy is also going there. So we have to kind of realize that most of our energy is going in that direction. We spend a lot of time there. So it's quite obvious that it's very difficult for us to kind of, to get through these situations and so on, because the amount of, and that has to be balanced with your sadhana, right? Like how much chanting you're doing, and how much you are in touch with Srila Prabhupada's books and so on. So, okay, ideally you can plan your life in such a way that you spend more time in your spiritual life and less time in the material life. But until you get there, we have to kind of go through this. But again, we have to stick to the basics, and we have to fight through this. I mean, we have to continuously practice. But as the time goes on, I mean, I can give my own examples, like things get better, like because the day in and day out, we'll have different realizations. We keep talking to devotees, we get their experiences and so on. So that's how we gradually develop, but that assurance is there. So these are kind of temporary things, like one gets disappointed at certain times when we deal with people, because most of the people are in the modes of passion and ignorance. So it's obvious, like when we are kind of entering into the pool, it's obvious, like we get wet, right? So it's kind of obvious. But yeah, if we have to stick to the basics, because it's the same, like the amount of time you are spending in the material world, because contacting the material persons and so on. So to handle this thing, you also need to have the spiritual strength. And if you kind of ignore these basics, then it's quite obvious that within no time, it will end up in a mess. I hope that somehow answered, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thanks a lot. I will try, Prabhuji. Please bless me.
I can just pray for you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
And I can see Gerda has raised her hand in a virtual manner. Gerda, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Krishna-katha Prabhu. Thank you for your lecture, and congratulations that your guru spilled the mercy and gave you initiation. Yes, I've sometimes heard about this. If you have gotten to the real knowledge that you're part and parcel of Krishna, and that your natural status is to serve him, that's sometimes it seems so natural to just leave everything, like maybe Arjuna wanted to. And sometimes we have some wishes in our lives, for example, found a family, or get a job. And on the other hand, you have the feeling that, oh no, I should go more into the Krishna consciousness. Maybe I could leave my worldly life for some time, or someone wants to do it at one point for his whole life. I don't know. How can we really see that what is the right decision to make? Because I have no Krishna around who can tell me, yes, go to the temple and leave everything you wanted to do, or yes, your status is now go found a family, have a job, and randomly serviced by this, or yeah. So do you have an idea, got some inspiration how to decide?
Yeah, I can. Thanks for asking this question, Mataji. It was nice to hear from you after a long time. Yes. So, I mean, if I can share from my experience as well, even I struggle like to understand this. In our life, we have to fulfill our more social responsibilities to your family, to your company, to your you're working with, or to your friends. You're obligated to kind of wish them, meet them, and so on. So we have this, definitely we have these social responsibilities. And then you also want to, you have responsibility. So you have to practice your Krishna consciousness. As you said, like, okay, sometimes I just want to, I cannot decide which is more important. And so this is basically going back to the discussion of Arjuna and Krishna. Even Arjuna, so basically the instruction for Arjuna was to do it as a service to Krishna. So he had to fight as a warrior, but he has to do it as a service for Krishna, but not himself. And coming back to your question, so, I mean, now one can say like, okay, for Arjuna, Krishna was next to him, and then he could have directly asked the question, but I don't have Krishna right sitting next to me. And this is where the Bhagavad-gītā comes into picture. Like, okay, Arjuna had Krishna, but we have Bhagavad-gītā to take shelter of in these situations. Like, if you are seeking a direct advice from Krishna, like Arjuna took, you have Bhagavad-gītā to take advice. And my Guru Maharaj says the same, like all your answers have already been answered in Bhagavad-gītā. It's just that you have to read it in a more focused manner and so on. And again, to expand, so this is the general framework or the general answer. But then, Mataji, to your specific questions, there's always, conundrum in the mind. What is more important for me? But this is where I see that as long as your social life or your more is balanced, only then you can actually practice Krishna consciousness. So that's what I found. Like, this is very basic, I mean, if I say like, because, okay, I got a job at a particular company and they are paying for me. And then let's say I have a temple event or temple program, which I want to do the service, right? And now there's a question like, okay, I know I have to, it's my real knowledge. I obtained that I'm the servant of Krishna, and then I just let the job go and I'll just go there. But if I come back next day, he says like, okay, you are a completely irresponsible guy. Like, I was waiting for you, and then you did not inform me, or you suddenly said you are sick, but what's this? And then that's actually not good, right? And he says like, okay, we do not want to work with. So what it means, like, you did not take a more thoughtful decision there, right? So here, yes, I mean, we have this eternal duty to serve Lord Krishna, but at the same time, we are obligated to our moral responsibilities as well. So yeah, I would say it's more a practical decision. I would say that. So for example, if we are sick and if we say like, no, this body is temporary and I have to serve Krishna, but first you have to visit the hospital, because you have to think more practical. First you have to get well, and then only you can do your eternal duty, right? So that's one the thing. So I mean, if we talk about the whole discussion of varnashrama and so on, like there are 4 sections and each one is obligated to do his duty, and then as we give up the results to the Krishna. So I mean, even Krishna never says you just have to just give up everything and come to him, like, but he never gave, he did not give this kind of advice, at least. But he said, give my results to me, and so whatever results we have, just offer the results to him. So yeah, to summarize, I would say we have to be actually more practical, and we also realize that we are definitely responsible for our social we are responsible to fulfill our social responsibilities, and you just cannot give up your family, or no, it's all temporary. No, it's not practical, because it's not practical in the long run, I would say. Like, okay, you can be a fanatic and say like, no, I'm a kind of liberated soul, like my eternal duty is Krishna, but I mean, you will lose your foundation, you will lose your feet off the ground, and then you're completely imbalanced. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. In the Bhagavad-gītā, do you have a like concrete shlokas or chapter that I remember I read the Bhagavad-gītā every evening, one shloka and the commentary purport, but I forgot where I found it. There was something I just remembered that like matched this, but I can't remember which section or which shloka. You don't know someone of the other devotees, maybe do you remember? Sorry.
I mean, I have my notes, but even I have this problem of quickly picking up something, but I can definitely share it with you. But I mean, most of the devotees give the examples of, for example, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he was a magistrate, and Rupa Goswami, he was managing the financial transactions of the king, and so on. But I mean, these might not exactly fit to your question, and I'm just thinking which verse will actually but I'll definitely share this with you. I have my notes. I'll share it with you.
Thank you.
So I think that's it. There are no questions in the chat box, and we have heard some very relevant questions and some relevant answers. Thank you for that. It was really a pleasure to have you with us. I personally liked the lecture very much. It was very thoughtful and well thought of. Thank you very much. And also I thank all of you who have joined us tonight. Also, there are some new people or some participants whom I have not yet seen here on our Zoom event, on our regular Zoom event, some of whom I don't even know how many people they are, because I can see in the participants list Redmi, and Redmi 98810822080. Anyway, there are some people who have joined us who are new to this, and who are of course welcome to join us next week. Next week will be Ram Navami. There are, all the calendar is always full of new holidays and special holy days. Just recently, I think it was the New Year's day in South India. So Happy New Year to those of you who celebrate that. And it is also Ramadan for those of you who celebrate that. Now is the time for breaking the fast. But yeah, next week will be Ram Navami, a very relevant and important day. So that means we will not be speaking about the subsequent verse of the Bhagavad-gītā, but we will hear a lecture about Sri Ramachandra by Dr. Vinay Agarwal. He is a member of our congregation and he knows a lot about the Ram Lila, and he will share it with us next week. And with that, I thank you very much. And I say, have a good night. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.